So let me quickly set a timer because Brian told me he's going to cut off my mic if I go over my time, because it's also like break time, you know? So hello, everyone. It's great to be back. As you can see, I'm quite the fan. When I really fell in love with the Netherlands like 12 years ago, because 12 years ago I had the opportunity to come live here for a year. So I actually lived in this beautiful country in Amsterdam. And it's kind of weird when you move to another country, it feels like an entire new thing, like you're entering a new world. And I felt a little bit like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I was suddenly surrounded with windmills and things I've never seen before, functional roads where my car can actually drive on. Java user groups as far as the eye could see. And of course, the best one-day conference in the world. If you discount the extra sessions yesterday. And I can happily report that after 1 year, I was one of you. So, sorry for the Belgians in the room, please do not report this back to Belgium, okay? This photo was taken on my birthday, which is also Halloween, so technically it's my Halloween costume. So that should work out. So, I actually wanted to talk to you about that year, because on that project, on that very first project here in the Netherlands, I was working together with a senior developer. Senior, super experienced guy. He did things in VI that I could never do. At that point, I couldn't even close the damn VI thing. But also senior in the sense he was 1 year away from retirement. And one day, I was just building my pull request. I sent it to him. And I could see that he saw my pull request because I suddenly saw him do like, And then he blurted out a sentence that I will never forget. "You damn kids with your code completion, you don't even need to know how to code anymore." It's like, what? What? This is normal, man. I mean, you gotta go with the times. Just adapt. So I totally ignored him and denigrated him. Now, I promised myself I would never become that bitter, but now we're 12 years later. And I was doing code reviews for university. And the cool thing is, I've been doing these code reviews for multiple years, so I could really see from 1 year to the next how it changed. And last year, I could see that they were kind of fiddling with ChatGPT a bit. But this year was the year that I thought, wow, they're really embracing these LLMs now. So I had a few observations. Now, the sheer amount of code, I'm not even going to ask you to raise your hands because everyone will probably say way up, right? If you give people a code vomiting machine, they will use the machine to keep vomiting more code. So way more code than before. Now, the general quality of the code, what do we think? Who thinks the quality went up? Who thinks the quality went down? Funny, because I disagree heavily. Because these, don't forget, these are second-year students that only learned Spring 2 weeks ago, and compared to the students of previous years, they actually had pretty decent code. Surprising, right? Then there was also the comprehension of the code that we checked, because not only did we do a code review, we also had one-on-one conversations with these teams to check, you checked it into Git, so you committed on it, but do you actually know what you committed? So what do you think? Comprehension, up or down? Up? Okay, down? Well, it depends. And whenever someone mentions it depends, your first reaction should be to ask, on what? On what? So it really depended on how these kids were using these tools. We had the one group that was really using this tool as a learning tool. So they asked to generate a piece of code. They saw an annotation that they didn't understand, like @request mapping or something, and then they would ask, hey, what is this annotation? And those kids, their comprehension of the code, way higher than previous years. Then you had the other kids who, in previous years, probably would have copy-pasted from Stack Overflow, but I would say that their comprehension is even lower now, because to get something valid out of Stack Overflow, you actually need to know quite a lot. You need to know what questions to ask, and ChatGPT, you don't even have to spell your question correctly. You know? So their comprehension was even lower. And now complexity of the code, how complex were their solutions, I can tell you it went through the roof. Let me give you 2 examples. The first example is they wanted to build a performant web service. ChatGPT gave these students who had just learned Spring 2 weeks ago reactive programming with Webflux. I think this is a clear-cut example that these LLMs are not always with us, and they are testing our future generations. Because these students that had this incident, they actually told me they hate Java and Spring because this was their first experience. Ouch. Other example. They were building a service that's doing a REST call to another service, and they were asking the same question quite a lot of times. So they thought, hey, we have to cache this, right? How do you cache something in Spring? At cacheable, simple annotation. But that's not what the LLM told them. The LLM told them you have to build something custom with a Redis database. You need to push the data in the Redis database. Then you connect your front end without security to the Redis database. What? And these were only 2 of the incidents. And in all these incidents I felt something in my brain creeping up. And that was the thought, these damn kids with their damn LLMs, they don't even know how to code anymore. And the second I thought that, I was having a flashback and I thought, oh no. Oh no. I'm the old guy now. I have become everything I promised myself that I would not become. So I went on an exploration to discover how. I mean, nice hairline. I'm not gonna make that when I get to retirement. Nice hairline. But how did I end up here? So I went exploring. I read a lot of books about change and how to deal with change and how to accept new technologies. And I could give you a bunch of cool quotes. But actually, the story that exactly shows what I want to tell you today is The Wizard of Oz. Because in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy meets 3 companions, and each of these 3 companions embodies something that I think is very helpful and very useful to have and think about when we're dealing with change. So I guess we're going to Oz, because it's a crazy idea I had. So here we go. So the first companion is the Tin Woodsman. He used to be a real human, but because it's fairy tales from the 1900s, you've all been to the Efteling, I think. Some of these fairy tales are pretty horrific. So this used to be a human, he's now a tin man, and what he desperately wants is a heart. Because he no longer has a heart, so he can feel. And I think that's where we need to start out at in this session. Because when we're talking about change, there's feelings. And we had a lot of feelings about these LLMs. I was angry, you know. But there's also people that feel like they've lost everything because these things can now do it, their job or the things that they're passionate about. Some anxiety. We also had the moment of, put it back in the box, put it back, we don't want this. We had that fear as well, you know? Pause it, let's stop it. And I think we often get dragged away by technology that we forget that we're all still humans and that it's normal to feel. I know it's weird to talk about feelings at a tech conference, but we're still humans. This is part of us, and we all had a different feeling when these LLM things started coming out and doing some of that stuff. I felt a bit depressed, to be honest, because I thought I was special. I'm still special, but not in, not in that way. I thought that I was a bit more unique because I had skills that I could code, and now suddenly this thing could do it for me. And I thought, like, why? Why is this change difficult? And why specifically is this change difficult for me, and not so much for some other people that I see? Well, there's a couple of reasons why change is difficult. It could be because change is often difficult when it's abrupt and unexpected, like this. We typically don't like that kind of abrupt change. We usually like change to gradually change, like the seasons or like a slow sunrise that comes up, right? That's what we like. We don't like these abrupt changes. And I know this because I love coming into an office when it's dark and seeing the sunrise. And whenever one of my colleagues decides to turn on the light when I'm not paying attention, and my eyes go, ah, the light, like I'm some kind of vampire, I don't like that sudden change. But the speed of change alone is not enough. There has to be something more. And the fundamental question we need to ask is actually one that's asked in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The caterpillar at some point asks Alice, who are you? And I think that's a fundamental question, how we see ourselves and who you really are. In the story, Alice actually says, I don't know anymore, man. I fell down this rabbit hole. I ate some cookies. I got tall. I drank something. I became small again. I don't know who I am anymore. And I think at some points in our career, we can feel the same, that we just don't know who we are anymore. So a quick question. Who considers themselves a software engineer or a developer? Quite a few. So to go back to the question, what do you mean when you say you are a software developer? Do you mean you code for a living? Do you mean that you solve business problems using code? Or do you mean you are a coder? And depending on how you answer this question, your reaction to this whole AI wave was probably very different. Me personally, I was a bit depressed because I consider myself a coder. Coding and this community is a big part of my identity. I wear this shirt to family parties. And they've accepted it by now because I will not relent. But you know what I mean? If how you feel about this, you solve business problems using code, this new wave of AI is probably the best thing ever, because you don't even have to write it anymore. You solve the business problem and you let the thing generate the code. So how we see ourselves and how we perceive ourselves is actually a big part on how we deal with change. Then you can say, yeah, Tom, but that's just for the negative things, right? Well, a lot of the self-help books and literature I read, it's not just about negative things. Even very positive things can be difficult. I get very emotional. Well, when my son was born, I had a bit of a problem, because I was very career-oriented my entire life. And suddenly, I couldn't be anymore, because my identity changed. I became a parent. And that's different. Some people say, yeah, I have a kid, but that's not what happens when you become a parent. You become something. Your identity actually changes. And that takes some time to reverberate, because it changes almost everything, you know? It changes your hobbies, it changes your sleep. Well, we have to be honest, it changes the amount of free time you have. And even though it's the best thing that ever happened to me, that change was still kind of difficult. And I was looking around, are there other people struggling with this? And surprisingly, on the DevOps France channel, I found this presentation by Margareta, who's going to be here later today, who had this slide. I changed in her talk about going back to work after becoming a parent. It's like, yes, exactly this. You change as a person. So these feelings, man, we can be cool about all these technologies, but still we are humans of flesh and blood, and we feel things. And what the Tin Man for me actually means is empathy. He doesn't necessarily want a heart to have a heart. He wants a heart so he can have empathy and share things with others. And I think that's important. Empathy for others helps a lot. Empathy for ourselves as well, to take the time that we need to recover from large changes and to really feel like, oh, this is a bit too hard for me, or this is a bit tricky, I'm going to take it slow for a while. I think that's good. And if we give empathy to others, it's not a zero-sum game. If I show empathy to someone, they get better, but I also get better. And doing that together, that will improve our collective resilience. So I think in big changes, or these changes, especially in our industry, some empathy for each other. And I wish I had some more empathy for that senior developer, because he had seen the world change. Second character, the scarecrow. And the scarecrow really has his brain full of stuff. You know, it's a scarecrow. And he really wants brains. But if you read the story, he doesn't actually want a brain. He wants wisdom. And now there's two ways to get wisdom. There's probably more, but let's deal with two first. One, you get out there, you try to experience things, you hurt yourself, you stub your toes, you get battle scars, and then eventually you become wise, because wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from failing. And the second way you can get wisdom is by listening to people who have wisdom. And that's something that I crucially missed all those years ago when I was just denigrating this senior developer and said, yeah, just go with the times. And there's two things that I want to share with you today where I thought, if only I had listened then, I would have been a better person. So let me give you two examples. So, hey, this microservice thing, it's really booming, right? This was 10 years ago. So, and he said, yeah. I looked into it. We'll make the same mistake as we did with remote EGBs. And I said, What does he know? Everyone is doing this. But the idea behind remote EGBs was that we could just pretend that the network doesn't exist. And if you look at our first implementations of microservices, where we just took a monolith and split it up, exactly the same problem happened. A lot of developers thought that they could just put a REST client in between and be done. So what he was actually trying to tell me is that history kind of rhymes. That there's often things that repeat themselves, especially in our industry. You can see it away from service-oriented architectures to monoliths to microservices, and now we're going back to these modular monoliths. So it's not exactly the same, but you can see these kind of waves. And recently I had a similar question in that same vein. A student asked me, do I still need to learn something? These LLMs can do everything, right? So do we still need to have something in our head? And I thought, I've heard this question before. Because you know, when books and writing first started, it was going to be the end of knowledge, because Plato said that at some point. When the internet came out, it was going to be the end of knowledge. That was my grandfather. Because my grandfather had a bar, and he believed that the way you get wisdom is by debating with your friends till 2 at night at a bar with some beers. Wise guy, yeah? Exactly. And he hated the fact that people can take their phone now and debates end in 2 minutes instead of lasting all night. Because he thought that the wisdom was in the debate, not in the actual knowledge you get. Of course, there's code completion. End of wisdom, right? We don't need to know anything anymore. We just type a dot and it shows it for us. And even he had a point. Because the reason why he made that initial comment was, I had included the library for something that exists in the JDK. And his reasoning was, if I don't have code completion, then I need to know all the methods that are available in the Java ecosystem. And then I would have known that it exists, and then I wouldn't have included this extra library. Now, what's it going to do with LLMs? I'm guessing probably the same. We'll yell for a few seconds. In the grand scheme of time, it's going to be a few seconds where we yell that it's going to change everything and we never have to learn anything anymore. But I don't think so. There's another way in which our history might rhyme, and that's this. You know, we've had these increasing layers of abstraction where it becomes easier and easier to program. And a lot of people say, yeah, but this natural language is just another layer of abstraction, right? Well, yes and no, because this time it's not deterministic. And people might say, yes, but humans also aren't deterministic. And people who have seen some of my talks are never the same 2 times in a row. It's always slightly different. But it does seem to rhyme. So if I had only listened to this senior developer, then I could have gotten so much of his wisdom. What I was really missing to get his wisdom, I forgot I have a second example. So let me get through this. I also had a thing where I had a cool new JavaScript framework. And I thought, oh, look at this cool JavaScript framework. And he basically said, oh, I don't follow these trends anymore. It'll pop on my radar if it becomes important. And I thought, why isn't he following stuff anymore? You know, why isn't he in the loop? And if I'd listened to him, I would have known that you determine how much change you focus on. And that's a very important lesson. It took me 6 months and a burnout to realize this. But you can determine how much change you focus on yourself. And we're being bombarded with a bunch of stuff. Because in recent years, you know, I used to be a developer, then I had to be a full stack developer, then I had to do operations as well, then cloud native became a thing, then I had to do security as well, and then for some reason, 10x. I had to do it 10 times. That's a crazy amount of things. We don't have to do all these things to a great detail. You know, I chose a while ago, especially after my burnout, that I would just focus on Java, and that's good enough, and I make a living. We can choose how much we focus on, and it might feel that we're getting a lot of change, but if you focus, it's okay. Actually, the analogy I like to make is with a horse and blinders. Do you know why they put blinders on horses? It's to make them less anxious, because horses have a wide field of view, they can even see behind them. And some horses that don't have these blinders on, they get scared because they're pulling a cart and they see the cart and they think, I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked. But by putting these blinders on, they have a lot more focus and they're way more calm. And I think
In some cases, we should put blinders on as well to stay more relaxed. Today's JFall. Today is not the day for blinders, you know. Today is a day to take the blinders on and be curious. And I think curiosity is really what the Scarecrow wanted. And curiosity is really a trigger for experience, and experience is a trigger for wisdom. Lost companion, the lion, the cowardly lion, who desperately wants some courage. And actually, in the entire book, he keeps showing acts of courage, even though he thinks he doesn't have it. And I think that's what we sometimes have as well. Because we want to be brave to take on certain challenges. We want to be brave to take on change. And it takes some bravery to do some of these things. For example, when the hype train of AI passes by, it's easy to say to be bombarded by, yeah, just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. But we need to somehow have some bravery to express our concerns and thoughts. I actually had the same with server-side rendering. I love rendering my HTML on the back end, but everyone's telling me, no, it's a bad idea. It takes a bit of bravery to go against the stream. So we need to be brave to express our concerns and our thoughts, to really think about what do we still need to do, what do we still need to design. We also need to be brave to learn new skills and hone existing ones. It's scary to leave something that you've been used to for a long time. I recently changed my job, and that was terrifying. And I first said no. They offered me my dream job, and I said no because I was afraid. And eventually, I had to find the bravery to change myself, learn new skills, and learn a bunch of new ones. And incidentally, I think that this new wave that's coming can actually help us with that while being the change. Because I think, and I've used this a lot, that these LLMs and these agents that we're seeing now, they have a lot of wisdom that they've stolen from everywhere on the internet. But we can use that. We can use that to grow ourselves and to get better. So bravery is what we also need. Bravery is in facing forward even when afraid or resistant. So those are the three components that I think are important when dealing with change, especially in our sector. Empathy for ourselves, when it gets a bit too much, that we just take a step back. Empathy for others, so that we learn from them, and that we, when we see that people are struggling, that we take the time to listen to them. Curiosity, to keep our minds open and to have a learning attitude. And bravery, because honestly, some of this stuff is scary. To see something like an LLM do the things that you love doing, that's scary. Now, in the story, sometimes one of these characters fails a bit. But what I also learned from the story is that they actually complement each other. For example, in some point, bravery, when bravery starts failing, being empathic for yourself and others and receiving some empathy, while also being curious, can actually help you become more brave again. And I really hope that today at JFall, you embody these things as well. Be empathic to all your colleagues. Be curious. Explore things that you've never explored before. And be brave to sometimes get challenged by the ideas that you've internalized. Now, if I could go back or say something to the younger developer that was denigrating to the senior, I would say, you're full of energy and curiosity. Use that curiosity to learn, but be empathic towards people that have a bit more trouble with change that's happening. Listen to them and try to help them out because they're used to something. And to the people with good hairlines, I would say help these younger developers, because we're full of wisdom. And this is wisdom that these future generations can definitely use, because sometimes change gets scary, and they might come with new things that scare you, but I think that together we can actually make a better future. Because those kids with their damn LLMs, they are the future of our craft. And if you ask any parent ever, they will tell you, kids, they grow up like this.